In California today, we face three serious challenges along our coast. The first challenge, the one that perhaps people in San Diego are most familiar with, is the loss of sediment or the sediment budget, the coastal erosion problems, and those are being studied here at Scripps by several groups. I think the second important challenge has to do with the health impact of pollutants as they're brought to the ocean either through storm drains or through other anthropogenic sources. Our surfing community, our swimming community is rightfully very, very concerned about these issues. The third problem is the one that Nancy already alluded to, and it basically has to do with the management of our coastal resources, or whether we can maintain fisheries at a sustainable level. And what I want to do today in this talk is to try to draw together elements of the different disciplines that are studied within our institution to try to show you how the different disciplines or different sciences interact to help us understand a little bit more about these coastal resources, and perhaps will help us manage them in an intelligent way. The particular animal I want to talk about today, I hope you enjoy. It's called Dungeness crab. The thing about understanding crab or understanding any life source is that you have to understand first the medium in which it lives. And as you'll see as the talk progresses, the crab, which lives in shallow water, is transported by the coastal currents. The coastal currents themselves are moved by the winds that go along the coast. So let me begin by talking a little bit about meteorology, then I'll get into the circulation. I'll allude a bit to some chemistry, and I'll try to show how all this ties into the biology of the crab. So the talk here is an effort to integrate the different disciplines, the research done not only at Scripps but at other marine science institutes in the state, and try to understand how to apply that knowledge to a practical problem, which is to maintain the population of Dungeness crab at a sustainable level. So let's first talk about the meteorology a little bit. Over California, in the spring, the summer, and the fall, we have a high pressure system, and that high pressure system is accompanied by a general sinking of air coming down from the free atmosphere above, and this warm, dry air basically traps the cold moisture that comes off the ocean into a thin layer here, which we call the marine layer. And we in San Diego all know the marine layer as that layer of clouds or fog that comes and keeps us company on the beach in the spring and summer, and makes our visitors very depressed if they chose San Diego as a place to visit for the summer. Within the marine layer, there's a very interesting distribution of properties. First of all, the height of the marine layer here is order several hundred to 1,000 feet. And what's important about that is it's usually shallower than the height of the coastal mountain range. So the coastal mountain range can effectively steer the flow in the marine layer. The density of the marine layer is much higher than that of the free atmosphere above. Of course, it's lower than that of the ocean. And so the marine layer runs around like a thin film on a table. The other important property is that the wind speed tends to be a maximum right at the top of the marine layer. So when you think about the marine layer, it's not only the fog, it also transports a lot of momentum. Now, in this transparency is intended to illustrate the speed of the wind along the coast of California. And each little white vector here represents a wind measurement, speed and direction, made at one of the buoys that's deployed by the National Weather Service along the coast of California. Notice that in general, the speed of the wind vector is directed parallel to the coast, and that's simply because of this effect I just told you. The airflow is steered by the coastal mountain range. Notice also that within the Southern California bight, we have very weak winds, or even in this particular case, winds that are reversed. And what happens is that this airflow comes down along the coast of California, but it separates at Point Conception and reattaches somewhere down here off the coast of Mexico. Those of you who've had the pleasure to camp or sail along the coast of Mexico know that it's much windier than we are here. And so here, our little Southern California bight here is actually a sheltered pool from the winds that other Californians live in and tend to think of us as being wimps for living down here. Now, the wind vectors here are superposed on a color code, and the color scheme represents the temperature of the sea surface as measured by a NOAA polar orbiting satellite. And the other speakers have already told you today how satellite-based resources have completely changed the way that we can understand the ocean. The color code here is that the colder temperatures, the purples and the blues, correspond to very cold water, and the warmer colors, red and orange, represents relatively warm temperatures. The pattern you notice here then is that the Southern California bight is relatively warmer than the waters to the north, which is clear to understand, but also warmer than the waters to the south, and that is directly related to the wind. So the first transition I want to make here is to explain that the patterns of physical variables that we see in the ocean are directly controlled by the winds that we see. How does that take place? Why is it that the winds bring cold water to the coast? This little angel here is supposed to be imposing a wind stress along the coast in the direction parallel to the coast. And the current shown by the vectors responds in two ways. The surface current basically drives along the coast in the direction that the angel is blowing, but there is a secondary circulation with the current veering at the surface off towards the right. Because the current at the surface has a tendency to veer off to the right, it draws colder water down from beneath to replace it. And that process, the drawing in of colder water, is what we in oceanography refer to as upwelling. Why is there this right-hand veering to the current? That's actually a fairly simple thing to explain. Imagine that you were throwing a ball from the North Pole down vertically, directly down to the South Pole. And imagine at the same time that the Earth is rotating, as you'll see in a moment, this is an animation. Then as an observer on Earth, and of course when we're measuring ocean processes, we're just that, observers on Earth, you would see this ball go in a curved path. And see if I can make this happen. Now, the tip of this little path is going directly, vertically up and down. But notice that the path on Earth is curved. All right? This is what oceanographers refer to as the Coriolis Effect. Sometimes some people even refer to this as the Coriolis force, but it's not really a force. It's just simply because we measure trajectories and paths on the Earth in a rotating coordinate system. And so, as I've shown you before, when you apply a force on the ocean in this direction, there's a tendency for the current to veer off to the right, and that's what drives the upwelling phenomenon. So I've shown you that the intensity of upwelling varies along the coast, and I've also shown you that the upwelling draws these nutrient-rich waters up into the coastal area. Here at Scripps, we have a group who, for a very long period of time, has tried to measure the distribution of physical variables in the coastal zone. This happens to be my own area of endeavor, and so I'm going to take a little more time to talk about this simply because I'm more comfortable with it. Typically, what we will do is deploy moorings along the coastal area. This particular area here is the area including the Santa Barbara Channel and then the area north up to Avila Beach up here. And typically what we do is we'll deploy moorings in the water for periods of 5 to 7 years. We need to measure long enough that we can capture some of the interannual variability as composed of the El Nino events, for instance. The moorings are deployed in transects along the coast, and each one contains instruments that measure surface currents at depth, temperature, and all sorts of other parameters. It's a tremendous task to maintain arrays such as this one. This particular work was sponsored by the Minerals Management Service, which is part of the Department of Interior, in the hopes of acquiring enough information that they could predict what might happen in the case of an accident such as an oil spill or someone falling off an oil platform. In fact, in a sort of a rather sad anecdote is that the measurements made at this particular point here were of tremendous use to the Coast Guard in trying to understand what was happening when the Alaskan airliner crashed in this particular area here. So this kind of an array not only teaches us a lot of science, but has a direct applied value in trying to help understand what is happening at every given point of time. It also builds up the database of information that we need to try to predict what might happen in the case of any given development. Now, what I want to do is to try to give you a good idea of how this upwelling process works, is I'm going to show you an animation of measurements of temperature made along 3 transects here. This transect is off of Point Sal, this one off of Point Arguello, and this one off of Port St. Louis. I've told you that each one of these moorings had somewhere between 6 and 10 temperature sensors. And so what we can do is we can draw temperature sections, as you'll see here, corresponding to each one of those transects, all right? And the color coding in this case is as the one I showed you before, with colder waters being represented by the blue tones, warmer waters being represented by the orange and reddish tones. And as I run through this animation, the wind will be blowing down the coast in the upwelling favorable direction. And I want you to notice then the evolution of temperature. What you'll see is these colder waters come up near the surface. Now, why do we really care about cold water coming up near the surface? We don't. What we really care about is the fact that the cold waters have been sitting down here far away from the sunlit areas, and as such they are rich in nutrients. All right? Anything that's up in the near surface layer has been grazed upon by all sorts of animals, and the nutrient level of these near surface water is depleted. But when we can bring water down in from depth, by this upwelling process, we actually increase the nutrient layer. We're basically feeding this whole coastal zone. And it's important to understand that the major fisheries in the world are located in the upwelling areas, such as this one in California. So now let me just show you the evolution of this field. So what you see now, the wind continues to blow along the coast. This little bar here denotes where we are in terms of the wind. This is the speed of the wind. Negative is to the south in the upwelling area. And just let yourself keep track of this blue water. Keep track of what happens at the surface, and you'll get the sense that the blue water is being drawn up to the surface. And remember, blue means food. Yeah, there we go. Now, typical vertical velocities in an area like this are reasonably slow. We're talking about maybe 10 meters a day. So if we're trying to draw water in for about 150 meters depth, it can take typically 10 days for this to happen. And the period that we're showing here in this field corresponds to about 10 days. But notice all of a sudden now you're getting quite cold water up here. These green patterns correspond to about 10 degrees centigrade and correspond to water which is initially at depth of about 120 meters. And as the process continues, we just keep drawing this water. So that's what the upwelling process is. And again, it serves essentially as a pump to draw up near the surface nutrients and food. To make that connection, the connection between the physical variables shown here as a sea surface temperature, another one of these maps, and food or chlorophyll, which is basically a surrogate for plant life in the coastal ocean. I'm showing a comparison between 2 transparencies that Jack Oram gave me at UCLA. And this basically illustrates then the quantity of chlorophyll that's found in the surface of the ocean along California. This is an annual average, and it's provided by another remote sensor that mounted on the CWIS satellite. Notice that the scale that's shown here on the right is logarithmic, so that you see that the pattern of chlorophyll in the water is very close to the coast. You'll notice that the chlorophyll is a minimum in the area that we live, simply because there is no upwelling taking place there. And notice that as you get down in Mexico, where the winds start up again, the chlorophyll increases. So what I'm showing here, this is my third transition. It basically shows that the circulation patterns basically lead to changes in the productivity of the coastal ocean. Well, what about crabs? The life cycle of crabs is a difficult one. Crabs live as adults for a period of 8 to 13 years. They live in shallow coastal habitats. They're scavengers. And every year they molt and they also mate. The female carries between 1 and 2 million eggs, for several months, and she releases them into the open ocean. And the eggs become little larvae, and these larvae drift around in what my biological colleagues refer to as a planktonic stage. Planktonic stage you can think of as when your children go off to college. They basically float freely in a netherworld, and their goal is to recruit back into a suitable environment, but hopefully not the same as their parents live in. I suspect that that's what Carl really had in mind when he bought that house. Anyway, when you come to the issue of trying to decide how to manage a coastal a coastal resource such as Dungeness crab here, the big question is what happens out here when these animals are floating loose into in the open environment. Remember, the mothers put out something like 2 million eggs, and only a few of these animals come back here. So this is a tremendously complicated box in which to understand the processes that take place. On the other hand, if we have no idea of those processes, if it's simply a black box, we basically have no significant chance of properly managing that fishery, because we can't tell what happens in the event of an El Nino, we can't tell what happens in any other sort of event. So the real advantage of the Dungeness crab is that over the last 10-year period, our colleagues up at UC Davis and others in New Zealand and other countries have begun to try to understand what happens to the larval stage of Dungeness crab, this planktonic stage. This is a map showing the quantity of larvae which are found in net tows occupied at each one of these stations. This was a cruise of a NOAA ship. The amount of work that is involved in getting this sort of data set is absolutely mind-boggling. But the results are very interesting, and they show that for the most part, this is the area off of San Francisco, by the way. This is called the Gulf of the Farallones. This is Point Reyes. Up here is Point Arena, and the color coding, once again, is the surface temperature. And what you see then in areas of strong coastal upwelling, lots of cold water going down the coast, but then there's a sheltered area in here. And in fact, at this time, most of the crab larvae were found just sitting down here in this little sheltered area away from the wind. So answer number one is the larvae like to go to places where they won't be carried offshore by the Ekman transport. So they're still out there, but they're safe. You know, they're not drifting in New York, they're in college. Then the problem is, how do they get back? Because we found crab, we don't find crabs only in these little areas, we find crabs all along the coast. And so the next question is, well, how do the crabs get back up here? And this is I apologize for the quality of this transparency, but I really felt I had to show it to you because it's a very interesting result. And again, represents a huge amount of work on the part of this group of people. What they had done is over a period of a year, they measured the amount of larvae which settled at each one of 4 places as a time series. So they went out diving, putting down settling plates, and recording on basically a once-a-week basis the number of animals that settled on each one of these plates at each of these 4 locations. All right. At the same time, they were monitoring physical parameters such as surface temperature and winds. And the result of this study is that the large settlement spikes always occur when the temperature is on the increase. And the question is, what do the two have to do with each other? It's not like larvae are looking for warmth or things like that. What is the physical process that combines to both transport larvae from this nice pool where they like to live up along the coast and also increase the water temperature? Well, the answer to that is illustrated in this pair of satellite images, one taken on the 5th of July, 94 when the wind was blowing like stink, and another taken about 10 days later when the wind had stopped blowing or relaxed. And what you see is that when the wind relaxes, there's a current of warm water comes charging up along the coast in here. And so the conclusion that these people have reached is that the resettlement of the crab larvae is really a process of transport along the coast by the relaxation current, which basically draws water back up along the coast. So you see the complexity here. You see how the upwelling, let me see if I can come to this the starting point. The processes that are important for these crabs, first of all, the marine layer dynamics, what happens in the atmosphere, combines into regions of very intense upwelling and then others that are sheltered areas, okay? What happens then is the upwelling relaxation cycle brings food into these shallow coastal habitats, and at the same time, the crab settlement is modulated by the cycle of upwelling and relaxation currents, which allows them to redistribute themselves along the coast. So the good news in this story is that this sort of mechanistic description, by that we mean where we take results of meteorology and use them to explain what happens in circulation, the results of circulation, and use them to explain where productivity lies, and then integrate all that into the life cycle of an animal. Now it's something that resource managers can begin to use to try to understand what might happen in the case of a natural change, such as might be induced by El Nino, or an anthropogenic effect. For instance, in the case of El Nino, El Nino affects the upwelling cycle in two ways. It promotes northward currents, so that would actually help resettle more larvae, but at the same time, because it makes the upper layer, it increases the temperature of the water column, it basically suppresses the upwelling process. So there are two things going on, and now we have some idea of how that might affect the life cycle of a crab. The bad news, of course, is that different animals all have different life cycles. And so simply because we understand what processes affect maybe the Dungeness crab doesn't really tell us an awful lot about how to manage other resources. And so there's a huge amount of work that still needs to be done to make real progress in this direction, although we're trying hard to get there. Where do we go from here? Well, one thing is clear, and that is that to bring the results of our science to a practical conclusion, we need to integrate the efforts that we do. We can't just simply continue to work within disciplines without talking to each other except at lunchtime. We've begun to do that, but it's a complicated thing to do, and it takes a cultural change in the way we work to do this, because we've always been trained to excel within our discipline, and our reward system is geared in that direction, and not so much in having us reach out to other disciplines. So this is a tremendous progress, and I have to thank Charlie Kennel for pushing us in that direction and helping us make this transition. The second point is that the coast of California is very long, very rich, and includes all sorts of different regimes of currents, of animals, and of winds. And so the Scripps by itself has no chance or even desire to try to tackle all these problems. We can only do this successfully by partnering between the different marine sciences institutions along the coast, the ones in Monterey, the ones in Humboldt, and all the other ones between. There's a start at this going on right now. There's an initiative called the California Coastal Ocean Observation System, which is intended to do just this. And it has a little website. Those of you who are web freaks, check out calcoos.org, and you'll see sort of an hourly picture of what the winds are all along the coast, some currents, and you'll see these sea surface temperature maps on a daily basis. My message to you is not only a conservation message. I also wanted to point out that this is probably why I left aerospace engineering to get into oceanography. But there's a serious message here, and I hope that you all go home and enjoy a good crab. But when you do that now, think about the richness of the processes that are behind this. Inform yourselves about what you do. This is the best thing that a group like this can do. Inform yourselves of what this can do, and share that information with your friends. Thank you.